So thank you for joining us today with Commercial Brokers International. I'm George Pino, CEO of Commercial Brokers International, and I got a very exciting guest today that I've been looking forward to having on with us. His name is Gino Barbaro, and there's a reason I really love this gentleman and his story, and I think there's a lot of value that can be brought to all of our viewers and listeners on this, and that, you know, Gino is not your typical investor. Right now, he's a multifamily educator, investor, operator. He currently operates and manages about $350 million in assets around the country. With his co-founder, Jake and Gino, they have started a premier multifamily education online community, and he focuses on the students' results and growths. And he has a ton of students that are following his principles, and we're going to go into a little bit of those and just touch on one of them. I think is one of the key ones. But what I really, he is an award-winning author. And originally, when I saw that, you're probably thinking the same thing. Oh, another book on analytics. And surprisingly, one of them caught my eye, and it was Family Food and the Friars. Now, this was actually a cookbook. And that really got my interest. And I found out that Gino actually had a previous career. And, a lot of questions that we get a lot of times from our investors is, how do I transition? I'm doing this, I'm getting too busy, but at the same time, I'm not making enough money to live off my investments. But at the same time, I don't want to give up I want to move from my full-time job so I have more time to commit. How do I go about that? And one of the things, Gino was in a previous life, probably had one of the toughest jobs out there. He was a restaurateur. And if you don't know enough about the business, number one, it has one of the highest failure rates. So successful restaurateurs are amazing. Great business people, but also they have the creativity. So because they have to bring the creativity to the table to be able to attract new customers and see things that are new. I think Gino's done that with his investment strategy and procedures, going out, creating different, even pillars of content or pillars of real estate, very similar to other business plans, but a lot of investors don't do that. So I thought I'd go into that a little bit. So Gino, tell me a little bit about one, and this is actually of interest to me. How did you make that transition? I mean, you were 18 years a chef. Is that
That was
correct?
a long time. Yeah, I got into the restaurant business because my dad was an Italian immigrant, and he opened the restaurant back when I was 8 years old, and I had been working with him since I was 8 years old. I went to college. That was the dream of all the immigrants, to have your kids go to college. So I went to college, and I despised working in a cubicle. I wanted to become an entrepreneur. So we opened the restaurant, a family restaurant, and I had been operating that restaurant for about 15 years. My dad passed away in 2007. And I had to come to the realization, am I living his dream or am I living my dream? And I didn't feel like I was living my dream at that point. And I really started despising being at the restaurant. I missed him. I think I loved working with him more than I loved the restaurant. And
Sure.
that's why I picked up that book from T. Harv Eker called Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. That changed everything for me. When I read that line, your fruits are in your roots, I suddenly realized my roots really weren't that strong. And my fruits, that's why. And I decided to get into multifamily, into real estate full time. I had dabbled a little bit. I had made some really bad mistakes. I got into mentorship in '09, met Jake in 2009, and he moved to Knoxville in 2011. And that's where we started investing in Knoxville. But for me, the restaurant was challenging. And when people think about jobs and think about real estate, the restaurant's a hard, thankless job. Weekends, holidays, and my values at the time, I was valuing family time. I was valuing a lot of things that weren't in alignment with the restaurant. That's why I went out and I sought real estate. More importantly, multifamily for me was a basic human need. It's food, clothing, and apartments. And I'm like, you know what? I like this vehicle. I like dealing with residents. I like dealing with stable properties that can cash flow. And that's why I selected multifamily, George.
Okay. Multifamily is great. And I think also wonderful, especially I think some of the municipalities can make it a little difficult. We used to
Yes.
be, my business partner and I, we're heavily involved in the multifamily market, both in the Los Angeles and Texas submarkets. I can tell you we sold all the Los Angeles properties first. Uh, Very difficult climate to be an investor in. It's one of the few fields, at least in Southern California or California nowadays, that the government can come in and tell you this is the rent that you're going to charge. And that made it very difficult for us to really monopolize, or not monopolize, but take advantage of the opportunities that were put in front of us, because of either rent control issues or other government items that they were requiring for us to retrofit buildings without being able to pass along any of those. So we moved along off from that into other states, and it sounds like you've done a great job with that. Now, on multifamily, now you had mentioned, it's one of the three things. You have food, shelter, so what are you looking to go into when you first started making your investments? Were you looking at workforce housing, luxury housing, or just kind of the middle road? Where do you find yourself in your investments, and why, is it good for you?
Well, we actually started out with the C workforce housing. I think that's where most beginning investors start out with. Like you have the 70s product, basic 30, 35-year-old property, higher cap rates. You're able to cash flow a little bit more. There's more deferred maintenance. And that's where almost every multifamily investor starts. And that's where you probably should start because you're getting better deals. You're able to cash flow. But as you get that experience, you start trading up your portfolio. We call it that conveyor belt theory, where you're getting assets on an imaginary conveyor belt. After a year or 2 years, you start putting those assets on there and they start matriculating the equity, whether you're refinancing the deal and selling it out and going up. So right now, I mean, if you had to ask me what my buy box was, we have a buy right criteria. I mean, we're looking for assets in this part of the market cycle that are a little bit newer, 80s and newer. We like, median incomes at least $50,000 in our metro, in our area. So it's still workforce affordable housing, but we'd like assets that are a little bit newer. We like unit mixes that more of like the townhome, more of that home feel, right? Instead of the garden style. We're not going to say no to garden style, but those townhomes are really awesome for us. We like apartments that have amenities in them, washer and dryer hookups. If they've got a pool, great. Laundry facilities, clubhouse, fitness center, dog parks, a place where, a resident comes on and goes, yeah, I want to live here. Something for long term, because George, after you're owning 1,000 units, a couple of the biggest expenses are taxes, insurance, but also tenant turnover. If you can keep those residents in your apartment longer, you're going to make a lot more money. So when you're focusing on that, when you're looking at apartments, think of yourself as what would I want and how can I create value for the residents?
No, absolutely. And one of the things that we did, I know as an investor, whenever we took in because we invested, I actually fell in love with C-class neighborhoods and properties. I think you're absolutely right. That's where an investor should probably start off with, because you also get a better education into some of the more unique aspects of property management or property ownership that you typically or you may not see in a Class A building. Now, not saying Class A buildings don't have their own issues or problems; they're just potentially different problems. And when we came to the investments, we always looked at long term, because we weren't necessarily looking to flip the property. So we weren't looking to do a cheap job, but we were also looking to upgrade the building as much as possible to be able to keep and let our tenants want to stay there. Giving them amenities, but also upgrading it. So we were some of the first ones to start putting in. I mean, we're going in C-class buildings, but we're putting in hard surface flooring. We're just taking out all the Formica countertops that can burn with a hot plate on it and put tile. We were retiling everything. At one point, even putting some Corian and some of the cheaper prefab granite stuff in there. But we're upgrading all of it for long term, because the way we looked at it is, especially in low-income neighborhoods, if you're having to do a make-ready, the tenants tend to be a little bit more transient in lower-income neighborhoods. And so if you're doing a make-ready every year and a half, and part of that make-ready is because they're not maintaining the carpeting, a lot of times you're throwing out that carpet. I'd rather have hard surface that I can just clean or patch very easily. So we kind of went that route as well to look to save costs. What are some of the other tricks or tips that you might have for an investor coming in to look at to be able to save costs, lower their expenses, but also increase their income?
Well, for yourself, what you just said is buy right and sit tight. We like that model. The only problem is if you're buying a 60s asset, it's hard to buy right and sit tight, because a 60s asset 20 years from now is going to be 20 years older. So you really just need to be aware of it. I think a couple of biggest issues. with any kind of real estate, it's water. You need to be careful with water. You need to be careful with drainage. I was out there with the CapEx guys this past weekend doing foundation work. That is one of the most insidious expenses you can have in real estate. You're talking about plumbing and blowouts. You need to make sure that there are no utility leakages. And what we do in these 70s buildings, you know there's going to be pin leaks. You need to be tracking utility. That's one of our KPIs is utility. You have to have it under a certain dollar per unit. And once you track that, that's the KPI. Another thing we love to track that we just started is percent work orders open. On a property, you have 100 units. Let's say there's 5 open orders. That means you have 95% of the work orders completed. What we noticed is one of our areas had 200 units where we separate our offices into 200 unit districts each. There's about 7 districts we have. One of the districts had 45 open work orders. The other ones had 10, 12. We didn't know until we knew. And we just talked about cutting your costs. Well, a happy resident tends to stay. People think that if you raise rents, residents are going to leave. No, residents leave when they're unheard of and when they're not taken care of. Chick-fil-A's food is not any better than McDonald's. What Chick-fil-A does is they deliver superior customer service. They feel heard. They feel appreciated. So when you have 0 work orders and you're responsive to your residents and you're sending out notices and you care, that is rare in workforce housing. I can tell you that for sure. Go on Google and look up the reviews. I'm not saying we're perfect or even really good, but we are trying to strive to do that. And if you're an operator, remember one thing, they're not tenants, they're residents. They're living in an apartment home, not a unit. They're creating memories. Have empathy for that resident because that resident is creating a life in your apartment home. And I think it's our duty to try to do our best to deliver something that's really quality, safe, affordable, clean, and a great product for the market. And if you can think of it from that perspective, go into it as an entrepreneur and think of it as a business, not just collecting some buildings here and looking at it as a spreadsheet, but putting yourself in their shoes. I think you'll be built for this business.
Yep. No, I think that is, one of the key things. We, as a landlord or an investor coming into it, you have to have empathy for who your clients are. You have to also understand that their lives are different than your life potentially, and you can't make the assumption that because you want this, that's what they're going to want. Now, granted, some of the best investors out there use, they say trust your gut. If I like it, someone else is going to like it, and that is true to the most extent. But at the same time, reality does set in, especially with workforce housing, when you have an investor who may have a little bit more income than the average workforce housing resident. And because of that, there's a little bit of a disconnect. So I completely agree, though, that if you can show that you care and truly care, not just lip service, but truly give them the what they are looking for and need in any housing, what anyone would expect. But at the same time, we always love to empower our residents to actually try and improve the community. We would give bonuses like saying, choose your neighbor. We'll give you $100 credit on your next month if you can refer. That's great. Choose your neighbor, do this, or we would go reach out and say, what would you like to see? How would you like us to build a community? Because you're absolutely 100% correct. I think if you build a community, then people will stay. They're not going to care about a $25 or $50 rent increase on an annual basis. What they're going to care about is, I can't believe I got that open work order for the last 6 months. It's a drip that's keeping me awake at night, and they haven't touched it, and now they want $50 more. That's what.
Yes.
So you're absolutely 100%, I think, correct. Nail on the head. So now we talked about the 3 pillars a little bit, or I glanced over it, but maybe can you help define what exactly those 3 pillars are for you for your investment strategy?
Yeah, for the investors out there, I'll go over the 3 pillars of real estate. Our framework is buy right, manage right, finance right. But I think for the investor out there, the 3 pillars of real estate is really important because it talks about, number 1, the market cycle, number 2, debt, and number 3, exit strategy. So when you look at the market cycle, you can see when Jake and Gino started in 2011, deals were on LoopNet. There was no sentiment. You could not raise capital. Cap rates were really high. That was a great time to get into the C assets because they were really low priced. as the market cycle starts to transition and we go from a buyer's market to a seller's market, all of a sudden cap rates start to level out. Why would I buy a C property at a 4.5 cap, but I can buy a B property at a 4 cap? They're getting to be very similar. So understanding where you are in the market cycle is crucial to developing your buy right criteria. As of this reporting, I think we're going to go, it seems as if we're going back into that buyer's market, right? It seems as if, asset prices are starting to drop a little bit. Brokers are getting a little antsy. They're starting to call you back right now. So I like this part of the market cycle. There's uncertainty and interest rates have risen, right? The exit strategy portion is really important because if you don't understand your exit strategy, what kind of debt are you going to get? If you're going to hold a property for the next 5, 6, 7, 10 years, you need longer term fixed rate financing. So hence, you're going to use that longer term fixed rate financing debt. If you're going to flip out in the next 2 to 3 years, well, you're not going to get yield maintenance. You may get a step down prepayment penalty, or you may get a short-term bridge financing. So what I'm trying to say on this 3 pillars, you're trying to encapsulate the entire portion of those 3 pillars by looking at where you are in the market cycle. Every deal that you analyze, what is the exit strategy? And from that exit strategy, you can actually start formulating a plan for the proper debt. And I think the biggest mistakes that I made early on was not understanding what my exit was. As we get into real estate, everyone says, I'm going to buy and hold forever. Well, in commercial, debt tends to reset after 5, 7, or 10 years. So understanding that, and like you said, George, in the beginning, you may not want to be in C-class housing for the next 5, 6, 7 years. As you're buying these assets, you're going to turn your portfolio over. So understanding that and giving yourself the flexibility through that exit strategy will allow you to trade up those assets.
Okay. No, awesome. Great information. We talked about the buy right. You're talking about exit strategy. Let's talk about manage right a little bit. So because I think manage right is probably one of the key things where a lot of people, as I like to say, trip over dollars to pick up pennies.
Yes.
Where they're looking just to save money in the short term by doing something either inexpensively or cheap, and that turns into a much bigger issue down the road, or they are just not, they're managing for the wrong asset type or asset class. So what would you say about that?
I want everyone to picture a wheelbarrow. You've got a wheelbarrow. The 2 back legs are the buy right and the finance right. Those are both fixed. Once you've done them, they're fixed. The wheel of the wheelbarrow is the manage right. It's in constant motion. And if you wanted to invest in multifamily, if you want to buy a business, whatever it is, those 3 pillars, a single family, you want to get into retail, you need to buy them and finance them properly, but you're always constantly managing, whether it's a business. And I think people really don't understand that it is a business. And if you're looking at it from that perspective, there's property management and there's asset management. Those are 2 distinct functions that work against each other, but should try to work together. The property manager wants to get butts in seats. The property manager wants to spend $400 on a ceiling fan. They want to spend the money. They don't really care. The asset manager is the one that's saying, hold on, the budget. They need to work together. Now, when Jake and I started, we were the property manager and the asset manager because we weren't syndicating. We were buying our own deals. But if you, even in your own mind, can separate both, the property manager really has to deal with the customer experience, the customer journey. The asset manager has to deal with the fiduciary of the investors and trying to maximize returns. But there's great ways of having both of them work together to align themselves. Because if you put better tenants in the units and you do spend granted and you do work for the long term, it's also better for the investors as well. So working in alignment with those 2 entities is crucial when you're investing in multifamily or in any commercial real estate venture.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree with you on that. It is the management, it does have to match. And I love your analogy about a wheelbarrow because, those 2 items definitely are fixed, but really depending on where that wheelbarrow is going, it's going to depend on also those 2 arms and how you push it along and or guide it through there, because it is an ongoing thing with the management itself. Some of the stuff that we did with our management on our properties, we're always looking to increase value by adding And we never did, and we never did look at, like I said, I'm never going to sell this property. The way we've always looked at it was, you know, it's always for sale. This is not a baby. This is not a child. This is not a family member. This is an investment. And as
Yes.
I explain to my clients I work with as well, as any investment, you should be analyzing that investment on an annual basis. And if you're
Yes.
if you're hitting your KPI for this investment, and if you're not, is there another investment that might be better off? And if so, then sell and move on and transfer into the other property. I mean, if I had a dog stock that I'm losing my butt over, if I believe in the company, I may double down and buy more of it. But at the same time, if it's just not performing and it's really on its way out, and I can see that, I'm dumping it and buying a different stock. And
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, it really should be that way for all the investment and all the investors. I mean, the people that hold on to it for generational and long term, even though it can be good and has been successful and helped a lot of families create some wealth, they're not necessarily taking advantage of the full aspects of owning real estate, by
Mm-hmm.
increasing bases, taking advantage of depreciation schedules, adding to the property to create value. One of the properties we did, we had a 392 unit apartment building that in Texas that had no covered parking.
Uh,
So the first
mm-hmm.
thing we did was we installed 100 carports. We didn't install 392. We installed 100 carports that we could sell for $40 a month. Average
Mm-hmm.
cost of each carport was $750. Steel construction. I mean, it was a bulk sale. It was 75,000 for 100 units. But on a cap rate basis alone, even at that time at about a 6 cap, we were tripling our returns because those parking spots sold out overnight. Everyone wanted to either be in the shade or away from hail.
Mm-hmm.
So those literally sold out in, I think, 2 or 3 days. And so we're always looking for how we can add value. How does that play along into your in the management style? Or, I mean, is that part of the business plan? Like if I'm doing an acquisition on a property, I'm going to plan the CapEx out for whether the amenities, whether it's a dog run or a pet cleaning station or a pool or whatever the traditional amenity, paddle tennis, hopefully not, or pickleball.
Please not. I'm going to comment on what you said previously because it's so important what you said about turning over your assets. We've transacted on over 2,200 multifamily units. We currently still hold 1,600 of those.
Yeah.
And when is it time to sell? Well, it's time to sell if you have investors and you need to satisfy an IRR. We've done 3 syndications. We've exited all 3 syndications. The remaining portion of our 1,600 units is my business partner, Jake, my business partner, Mike, and myself. We've had the luxury to hold on to those because they're in a great market. They're really well-maintained assets. Median incomes are great. They're not functionally obsolescent, meaning that they've got central air. They've got great bones to them. Once you start seeing an asset start to deteriorate or start to get old, or you don't like the gentrification or what's going on with the neighborhood, median income's dropping, that's when you can say to yourself, this may be time to offload the asset. We're in an amazing market. Knoxville is going to generate 70,000 additional people over the next 5 years. So we understand that if we can hold for the longer term and we have these assets, we're going to get that appreciation just from the increases in rents that we have right now. So understanding your market and understanding when it's time to sell is really, really important for you. You may find a better opportunity, like George said, where you have a 1970s product, you can sell it and get into a 1990s vintage that may be a little bit smaller, but there's a lot less headaches for you. The resident base is better. There may be better value adds. Understanding that is what makes you a truly powerful investor. But when you're talking about certain value adds, when we are looking at properties, we've bought the last 3 properties on what we call loan to cost. 80% loan to cost, where it's phenomenal. The bank is funding 80% of the loan rehabs. We have a 5-year term on these things, 2 years of interest only. So it gives us plenty of time. And credit unions and community banks have been phenomenal over the last couple of years. Credit unions have really come in over the last 18 months.
They
because
very much have. Absolutely.
their rates are much better. And you know what happens? We'll buy them on the front end. When the property's repositioned, then we'll take the deal to agency on the back end. We typically try not to buy agency on the front end because there's there's a lot of value add component to it. So we'd rather just buy with community. They're a lot less flexible. They're a lot cheaper on the front end, unless the deal is stabilized and we're doing a momentum play. But for the most part, a lot of the value adds, we'll buy them with community or credit. Adding value, what we see with these properties, they're mom and pops. They're like Gino at the restaurant. They've got no systems. They don't even have a website. They've got no processes. They're usually under market rents. They're usually not charging any fees, not billing back for water, not billing back for pest. They usually have a lot of delinquencies on the books. They usually have month-to-month residents. There's a lot of value. We call evaluation through operation, not just renovation. I mean, a lot of the syndicators the last couple of years would come in and blow out these apartments, spend $10,000 a door, do 30 or 40, and then flip to the next person. If you're going to operate this business, there's so much where you can go in there, raise income, but also lower expenses. And by lowering expenses, I had mentioned a couple of things you can do. We send out a report every week. It's called the Weekly Pulse. We're tracking delinquencies. We're tracking vacant unrented. We're tracking lease terminations, lease expirations, all of the KPIs. If you can't measure it, then you can't manage it. And that's what makes a truly excellent property management company, understanding what the KPIs are to move that company forward. And one that no one ever talks about in my business is PPU, profit per unit. We want to know how much profit per unit each one is performing in our portfolio. We're shooting for $300 profit per unit after all expenses, profit in our pocket. Last month it was $278. That's what we profited per unit. And once we see that, we bonus based on that number. We want to know how much cash is left over. We don't care if we own 7,000 or 10,000 units. If they're not profitable to us, what's the sense of having that headache? I'd rather have less units, but make more profit per door. That's just our mantra. We read the book Small Giants. We're big advocates of that. I don't have to be the next Facebook to have a truly amazing life and to truly leave an amazing legacy. I just need to understand my numbers, and I need to understand what numbers are important to me and to my partner, Jake.
Absolutely. And, something you said there that, the numbers, what you don't know, you can't manage, with the KPI. If you don't know what they are, you can't manage the information coming in. And that is so true with everything. And when it comes to investments and life in general, as well. And, one of the things as well, when it comes to the investment horizon, what I'm hearing from you is that really this is business 101. It's treating this as a business. It is, make your business plan, have your mission statement. Your mission statement can be, I want to give the best affordable housing, and, with no deferred maintenance issues or, 5 orders open, which is incredible. I mean, I don't know the size of the building, but I'm assuming you're not doing the ones and twosies buildings. Doesn't make sense to invest over multiple small buildings as opposed to larger. So I love that. And really, I think that's also one of the biggest mistakes a lot of investors make going into it. They're not looking at it as a full business. They're not understanding. They're thinking, I'm just going to buy it, rent it, and collect the rents. Not looking short-term, midterm, what's happening in the marketplace. Now, are you using for your projections? Because there's a lot that can happen in specific markets. And I know once you become pretty in depth inside of a market, you are very familiar with what's going on in. But at the same time, as you come out, things are changing. Are you using any of the newer technologies or anything like AI maybe to help kind of look for those value add type properties, that something may have more parking in an area with no parking, in an urban infill neighborhood, things like that? Or what are you using? Or do you just have old school, a big team of people crunching numbers and looking at it?
George, you made a great point a second ago, and I have to go back to the point you just made, and I'll talk about the automations. And this is the reason why I had one restaurant for over 20 years. It's because I had no mission statement. We create communities that empower people to be the best versions of themselves. And we have core values: people first, extreme ownership, unwavering ethics, growth mindset, and make it happen. It took months for us to flush those out. And if you're a limited partner and you're investing in deals and you're trusting your money to an investor or an investor group, ask them what their mission statement is and ask them what their core values are. And if they don't have them, I'm not saying they're not going to be great, but I've known that if I need to hire or fire an employee, I would always blame the employee back at the restaurant. But how can I blame an employee if I'm not the right leader? If I didn't set the expectations, if there's no North Star? Those are what your core values are. That's what they are. People first and extreme ownership for us is really, really important. So when you're talking as a limited partner, understand that it is a business. And if you're running this business well and you have those, you can hire and fire employees. You can hire and fire vendors. You can make those decisions. Now, as far as projections and all, I mean, we're using sites like Prexy to gather a lot of the data. I actually just got an interview from somebody for AI to be able to use it for our customer journey as far as customer experience. We use Appfolio. Appfolio is like the saving grace for us. It's the property management software where you can get reports, you do work orders. We're using virtual staging. What a great tool that is. Empty room, put some furniture in there, boom, looks great. We're doing the virtual tours as well. Anything that can increase the customer experience that makes your property more marketable. And believe it or not, you go low tech too. In Knoxville, Tennessee, Craigslist rents apartments. Who would have known that? That Craigslist is still around in 2024. We rent a lot of apartments on Craigslist. So, don't be worried about going old school because you still need that touch. You still need that human element to it. But if you can delegate a lot of those, I guess, mundane tasks to AI and to, all the property management softwares, go ahead and do that. That will save you a lot of time and it'll make you a lot more efficient.
Absolutely. No, I love that. And I've just seen some new AI stuff where, like they're tracking where your residents are working on average,
Yes.
where they go out, where they go shopping, things like that. And for me, number one, if I'm noticing a big group of residents going to another area or so, I may be reaching out to that shopping center saying, hey, can you give a discount to my residents?
Yes. Yes.
So it's value add. I know where my residents are going. I can give value to them by giving them a little bit of a discount if they stay with me when they go shopping. Or it might be something as simple as, all my residents, majority of my residents work within walking distance. I don't need parking as much. How can I then make use of it? So I think that's where I see AI playing a little bit of more of a role in it right now. Down the road, I think they're going to try and use AI for the leasing side and everything else. But I think it goes back to the humanity of it. I mean, we're not dealing with widgets. We are dealing with homes. And as a home, you want a human attached to it. You want to have that emotional connection, so to speak, whether it not just a straightforward, here's my $5, I can stay here for the night kind of thing. You're really building community because, I think for most investors on the long term, it's going to help because as you build community, you have lower turnover, you have lower make ready, you have lower make ready. On a 5 cap basis, every dollar that you save is worth $20 when you sell it.
That's right. It's amazing.
So it's amazing. And a lot of people don't think of it that way because, every dollar you actually save goes directly to your NOI. As opposed to income may not necessarily translate 100% to NOI because there's costs to acquire income, costs to acquire customers and things like that. But savings on that. So we're always big on that as well, trying to make properties efficient, running efficiently. We've looked at different aspects. Now, are you upgrading? I heard of a new Presidio Bay Ventures over in San Francisco has been acquiring a lot of office buildings now, and they're really going high tech with them. And I see this is coming up even in some C neighborhoods, C plus, B minus neighborhoods, where we're getting rid of the old school key method. It may be attached to your access, maybe a cell phone. You'll have limited utilities when you leave the room, the apartment, so that you're not leaving it running when you're not there. Things like that that'll save costs and save money. And and even some landlords, you have to look at it as a business side. Just because you're not paying for the utilities doesn't mean if it's running 24 hours a day, it's not costing you more money. Because there's going to be higher maintenance, there's going to be more breakdowns, things like that. So you have to look as a landlord, how can we make this work for everybody? And even if it's helping and showing a tenant how they can save money by being more efficient.
Mhm.
So are you incorporating a lot of that or any of that or into your aspects?
We haven't yet with the smart thermostats and the smart doors and locks in the C and B space. The problem that I have is costs haven't come down enough because it's also monthly recurring revenue for them. They're charging you monthly per lock and per thermostat. So a lot of our properties, they don't really deem them. I don't think our residents are there yet. But if you're in the A space, if you're renting out luxury A minus, B plus, you're probably going to have to do that on the front end. And anyone building new, if you're doing build to rent right now, because we're thinking of doing some build to rent, that's all going in there. Because once it's in there from the beginning, it's a lot easier than actually trying to retrofit. And once you're trying to change not even residents' minds, but your property managers' minds, it's a big sell to say, hey, we're going with all this smart tech. So for us, the cost hasn't gotten down yet as much as it should. Because when you're renting an apartment for $1,100 or $1,000 or $1,200 to get smart devices in there, it's going to cost on the, and unfortunately, we think linearly. You do save money, I think, in the long run. If you're talking about, like you said, with the technology and with the thermostats, when the apartment is vacant, you can control it. You don't have to go anywhere. You're seeing where it is, not having to go and do locks on the front end. But sometimes it's just the cost is prohibitive on the front end. So I'm hoping that these costs do come down in the next couple of years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I hope so too, because I think there's a lot of fun little treats when I've seen.
Yes.
I haven't been to the multifamily vendor that I haven't been there in 3 years with the big one in Vegas when they had the multifamily convention.
Yes.
Multifamily apartment owners convention. That was it. The big one in Vegas. There's always fun new stuff. And every time I'd walk through there, I'm like, I wish I could incorporate that in my building, but wrong tenant base or wrong resident base. So
Uh-huh.
I get that, but I see a lot of new stuff, and I'd love to be able to bring that to a lot of our residents as well. And that's part of it. Even something as simple as throwing in one of my investor friends of mine. He's been very successfully putting in. Well, with the changes in laws, they've been able to submeter some of the water and stuff in California. Traditionally, it's not submetered. So then he started putting in washer. No one, everyone nowadays, they either go out to eat or they call in Uber Eats or DoorDash. Not too many people cooking these days. Not too many people using a dishwasher as much, especially in a 1-2 bedroom apartment. So
Mm-hmm.
a couple companies out there, they have a great system that is the exact same size as a dishwasher. For $1,200, it's a washer and built-in dryer.
Oh, cool.
And so what he's doing is he's charging an extra $50 a month if they want it, and he'll replace it. It already has the plumbing in place because the dishwasher,
Yes.
and they actually work. So he's been at a even at a a 6 times uh, cap rate. You know, your $50 a month is it works
Six
out
hundred bucks a year.
600, yeah, just under 600 a year or right after. So, but no, I mean, but on a cap rate basis, it translates to substantially more than what you even paid.
Yes.
You're paying $1,200 for coming in that it can be installed with just your handyman can install it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so are you seeing anything like that might be of interest for some of the, operators out there that are listening in?
I'm trying to think of, for us, we're just implementing on our C and B space. The biggest amenity that we've seen over the last couple of years is just simple washer dryer hookups. If you go in and you take over a property, if you can install a washer dryer hookup, you will get $50 a month on average more. And we've also been implementing in our property that we just took over the last 2 years, a card reader with software for washer dryers in laundromats.
Okay.
Because it's just one of those things. We're just sick of quarters. These older properties, a lot of those they have those old machines with the quarters. They're great. Caldwell Gregory comes on, they do their lease audit, and they take out the quarters. You never get all the quarters. They're never 100%. The quarters seem to have legs. They seem to walk away. So it's always nice to get a card reader, and that's what we're going to right now. The software involved needed to do that. I think that's a great amenity for our space to get these upgraded washer dryers with the card reader. The thing is phenomenal.
Absolutely. And, what's nice is that with the card reader, it makes it easier for them as well. Because nowadays, no one has change. No one
No, that's right.
around there. So,
That's right.
it's a win-win for everybody as well. And it will probably not just the theft of the collection, but the theft of break-ins, in
Yes.
neighborhoods. I know that was one of the issues that we always had with some of our buildings where people don't wait at night. they just break in and just steal $20 in coins.
Hmm.
It is what it is. So we just had to deal with it. So, you know, I've loved the opportunity to speak with you. I mean, I think I've just scratched the surface here, and I'd love if you're interested to have a follow up a little bit more, maybe delving a little bit more in line with a couple of the books that you have out there for investors, which we'll promote out here as well. It'll be underneath here. All of Gino's contact information will be here at the bottom of the video, but also we'll have it on the links as well. So if you have anything, just any questions, you're free to DM me. I'm happy to put you in contact and send out his contact information as well for that. But, I want to say thank you. I don't want to keep you too long. I know we've been going for about 45 minutes now talking.
We
And
could go on for another 40 if we could, because when you've been doing it
easy,
for 30 years like yourself, and I've
easy.
been doing it for long. I mean, there's so
Yeah,
many stories and there's so much. I'll just leave the listeners with this. It's been a pleasure being on here. I love talking real estate. And if you're looking to transition into this, it's one of the best businesses on the planet. From a tax
absolutely.
perspective, from a long-termism perspective, you can't buy it on the internet yet. I don't know if you can ever buy it on the, I don't think you're going to be able to, but it's one step at a time. Learn how to educate yourself, take massive action, have someone help you implement, find mentors out there, but more importantly, go out there and really, for us, what I always like to say is just find the right group, find the right group of people you want to surround yourself with, and just learn from them.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing because I think ultimately, just like what you're doing right now, coming on, and what we do, going out to other shows and podcasts and channels, it's all about education for us. If
Mhm.
the industry can be elevated, there are some bad players out there. There's some good players. There's some great players. I think that if we all insist that we hold ourselves up to a higher standard, then everything's going to come up. All boats rise in a rising tide, and if we can help rise that, then it's just that much better. So I love that thought
I
process.
agree.
Looking there on that. So again, all of Gino's contact information will be here. Stay tuned for our next show, and look forward to hearing from you as well again and talking again.
Thanks, George. Appreciate it, brother.
Absolutely.